Step away from the vehicle. The order cracks like thunder across a polished DC block as Officer Bradley Towns strides toward a black man in a flawless Navy suit. The man, Dr. Jonathan Hale, places his coffee on the roof of his sedan and turns with steady, practiced calm. He has felt this storm before. Not here. Not like this. People slow, then stop. Phones rise. The scene begins to record itself. Towns crowds Hale's space, voice swelling for the audience. Keys. License. Hands on the hood. Palms down, Hale's watch glints against the paint. Officer, this is my car, he says evenly, each word chosen like it might be Exhibit A. Towns smirks, scanning the suit, the calm, the quiet power he instinctively resents. Funny. Folks like you don't usually shop in this neighborhood. The silence isn't silent. Door chimes, distant traffic, the breath of witnesses. A woman murmurs, "This looks wrong." Hale feels humiliation gathering like rain, familiar, heavy, undeserved. "You're escalating without cause," he says, head high, voice low. "Call your supervisor." Towns laughs for the cameras. "I'm the only supervisor you need." He begins a performative search, tossing papers from the passenger seat, knocking Hale's briefcase to the curb. Folders burst, pages skitter. Someone films a close-up of Hale's cuffed hands. Someone else whispers, "Keep rolling." A second cruiser idles at the corner. His partner, Rodriguez, watches with a crease between his brows. Something about the man in the suit, his posture, his measured diction, does not fit the script. Dispatch barks across the radio. "Body cam compliance spot checks tonight." Towns taps his camera on with theatrical flourish. "Happy," he says to the crowd. "Transparency." He crouches by the driver's seat. A practiced hand slides under the rail. His thumb presses against a tiny plastic bag that didn't come from this car. He palms it like a magician concealing a coin. "Look what we have." He lifts the bag just high enough for the phones to catch the moment. Gasps. "Felony possession," he announces, victory sharpening his grin. Hale's calm ripples, then settles. "That is not mine," he says, eyes locking on Rodriguez, on the nearest lenses, on every witnessing face. "Document everything. Truth has a long memory." Rodriguez swallows. He saw Towns's hand disappear before the discovery. He opens his mouth, then closes it, the weight of rank and culture pressing on his chest. The crowd bristles. "Test it," someone shouts. "Call a supervisor." Towns crows louder, feeding on attention. "Hands behind your back." The cuffs click. The sound is small, but it echoes through Hale's bones. His phone vibrates in his pocket. The screen glows through the fabric. "Deputy Director, urgent." A few bystanders capture that, too. Rodriguez sees it and pales. Hale lifts his chin. "Officer," he says, voice now edged with iron. "You are making a grave mistake. Reconsider. Right now." Towns shoves him toward the cruiser. "Grave mistake is thinking that suit protects you." Cameras track the indignity. Hale's eyes find the nearest lens and hold. "Do not stop recording," he says, each syllable a fuse. "Let the facts breathe." The door slams. Siren chirps. On the roof, the untouched coffee cools under a perfect evening sky, while the man who owns the car, the man everyone misjudged, is carried away like a warning. He closes his eyes, not in defeat, but in quiet calculation. Somewhere across town, a team will notice those urgent missed calls. Protocols will awaken. Names will be dialed. And the officer who thinks he controls this story will learn what happens when truth arrives wearing a badge he never imagined. 6 hours earlier, the day had begun with order and quiet discipline. Dr. Jonathan Hale rose at dawn, the Virginia sunrise filtering through blinds onto framed photos of his wife and 2 children. The man the world would soon see in handcuffs was, in truth, the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a leader known for calm precision and an unshakable belief that justice must begin with integrity. As he brewed his coffee, morning news replayed stories about police reform and accountability programs. Hale watched silently, knowing those policies had been written under his direction. Across town, Officer Bradley Towns was already ranting in the precinct locker room. "More oversight nonsense," he barked to anyone who'd listen. "Feds think they can run the streets from their fancy desks." His partner Rodriguez stayed silent, uneasy but accustomed to the outbursts. Towns's locker was plastered with photos of arrests, mostly young black men, all framed as trophies. 7 citizen complaints sat unresolved in his personnel file, each under review. At headquarters, Hale spent the morning reviewing classified reports on departmental corruption. His desk overflowed with data, disparities in arrests, body cam failures, and misconduct cases buried under bureaucracy. Reform was coming, but he knew it would provoke resistance from officers like Towns, men who feared losing unchecked authority. Before leaving, Hale texted his wife, "Home by 6. Don't start dinner without me." Meanwhile, Towns was prowling affluent neighborhoods in his cruiser, itching for control. Every polished car driven by a person of color triggered his suspicion. He made stops, demanded licenses, found nothing, but left humiliation in his wake. By late afternoon, dispatch announced random body camera inspections. Towns cursed, reluctantly switching his device on for the first time in weeks. At exactly 5:30 p.m., Hale left the bureau in his personal vehicle, choosing discretion over motorcades. Tonight's mission was personal, a quiet community outreach meeting on 5th Street to rebuild trust between police and citizens. He planned to listen, not to lead. Dressed impeccably but without insignia, he looked like any other professional man ending his workday. Fate, however, had a darker script. Towns's radio crackled. Suspicious activity reported on 5th. Black male near luxury sedan. Possible theft. His pulse quickened. "I'll handle it," he replied. He pictured another easy citation, another example to boast about later. Hale parked in front of the community center, reviewing his notes one last time. "Reform begins with empathy," he had written. When he stepped out, straightening his tie, he didn't notice the patrol car turning the corner, nor the glare fixed on him from behind its windshield. From that moment, 2 lives, one driven by purpose, the other by prejudice, were set on a collision course. The street would become their stage, and the world would be the audience. What neither knew was that every move, every word, every injustice would soon be broadcast far beyond the DC night. Evening shadows stretched long across 5th Street when Officer Bradley Towns stepped out of his cruiser, his chest puffed with arrogance. His boots echoed against the pavement as he approached the man in the suit, Dr. Jonathan Hale, who had just locked his car. "Get your hands off that vehicle, boy," he barked, loud enough for every bystander to hear. Hale turned slowly, surprise flickering into weary understanding. He'd seen that look before, authority mixed with contempt. "Good evening, officer," he replied calmly. "Is there a problem?" Towns scoffed, circling him like prey. "Yeah, the problem is you trying to steal a Mercedes that doesn't belong to you." He shoved Hale against the hood with unnecessary force. The man's coffee spilled to the curb, steam curling like smoke from a gun. Phones lifted all around. The crowd sensed injustice brewing. "Officer, this car is registered to me," Hale said evenly. "Check the plates." Towns laughed for the cameras. "Sure it is. And I'm the president." He began the aggressive pat-down, theatrically loud. "What's next? You're a surgeon? Maybe a senator?" His tone dripped with mockery. "I work for the federal government," Hale answered, his patience thinning but his composure flawless. Towns sneered. "Yeah, sure you do. Mailroom, right?" He ripped Hale's wallet from his pocket, holding up the ID with exaggerated disbelief. "Dr. Jonathan Hale. Oh, fancy degree. Did you print that online?" Rodriguez arrived, drawn by the commotion. He froze when he saw Hale's measured expression, too poised for a criminal. "Brad, maybe just run his ID," he muttered. But Towns ignored him, rummaging through Hale's car. He kicked open the briefcase, scattering confidential papers across the street. The golden FBI seal glimmered faintly under the streetlight, catching Rodriguez's eye. His heart sank. "Brad, wait." Towns cut him off, grinning as his fingers slipped a tiny plastic bag from his belt. Well, he shouted, holding it high. "Guess what I found, folks? Cocaine. With intent to distribute." Hale stared at him, disbelief flashing to fury. "That's not mine, and you know it." "Yeah." Towns smirked. "They all say that." He turned to the crowd. "See? This is why I do what I do." The phones caught everything. His planted evidence, the taunting words, the injustice unfolding frame by frame. Rodriguez stepped closer, whispering, "Brad, that's enough. Something's wrong." Towns barked back. "What's wrong is you going soft. Get the cuffs." Hale's phone buzzed again inside his jacket, screen visible. "Deputy Director, Emergency. Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Rodriguez's face drained of color. He'd seen that name in interagency memos. Brad, he said hoarsely, you need to stop. Right now. Towns ignored him. The cuffs clicked around Hale's wrists with a cruel finality. You're under arrest for possession and attempted vehicle theft. Hale straightened, even in chains. Officer, he said quietly but firmly, you have made a mistake that will change your life. Towns shoved him toward the cruiser. Yeah? The only thing changing is your address. To his cell. The door slammed shut. Rodriguez stood frozen, knowing history had just shifted. The crowd murmured, outraged and filming. Somewhere, inside that silent phone still buzzing in Hale's pocket, the wheels of federal power had already begun to turn. The ride to the precinct felt endless. Dr. Jonathan Hale sat silently in the back seat, his wrists sore from the handcuffs, but his dignity untouched. Through the window, city lights blurred past, each one reflecting his calm, controlled fury. He had endured humiliation before, but tonight was different. Tonight, justice would see every detail. Officer Bradley Towns hummed to himself, proud and oblivious. Another one off the streets, he muttered, glancing at his reflection in the rearview mirror. You people think money and suits make you untouchable. Rodriguez sat beside him, knuckles white on his lap. His voice was tight. Brad, you should have called the supervisor. Something's off about this. Towns smirked. You worry too much. Textbook arrest. At the precinct, the moment Hale stepped through the doors, whispers began. The desk sergeant froze mid-sentence, eyes darting between the elegant prisoner and the paperwork Towns handed over. Possession, huh? The sergeant muttered uncertainly. You sure about this one? Sure as sunrise, Towns boasted. Got the evidence right here. He tossed the plastic bag onto the counter. Hale looked directly at the sergeant. I request my one phone call, he said calmly. And I strongly advise you to listen when I tell you who I am. Towns rolled his eyes. Oh, he's full of stories. Go ahead, genius, call your boss. The sergeant hesitated but handed him the receiver. Hale dialed from memory. This is Director Jonathan Hale, he said, voice low and deliberate. I am currently in custody at 5th Precinct under false arrest. Initiate Federal Protocol 7 immediately. The room froze. Protocol 7, a phrase every law enforcement officer knew but never expected to hear. It was reserved for emergencies involving high-ranking federal officials. The sergeant's face turned pale as paper. Director. Hale, he repeated softly. Towns laughed nervously. He's bluffing. Moments later, the sound of screeching tires echoed outside. Black SUVs with government plates stopped in front of the building. Men and women in dark suits poured out, flashing FBI credentials. The air changed, authority reclaiming the room. The watch commander, red-faced and trembling, burst into the booking area. Officer Towns, in my office. Now. Towns straightened, forcing a grin. Sure thing, Commander. I can explain everything. When he entered the room, his grin died. Half a dozen FBI agents stood around a woman in a tailored suit, Deputy Director Carter. Her badge glinted beneath the fluorescent light. Officer Towns, she said coldly. Do you know who you arrested tonight? Yeah, some guy pretending to be important. She stepped closer. That man is my boss. The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words hit like thunder. Towns' confidence drained. That's impossible. Carter gestured to a tablet. We've already reviewed your body camera footage and the civilian videos. Every second of your misconduct is on record, including the moment you planted evidence. Towns stumbled back, face ashen. It was. Enough. The commander's voice broke, filled with fury and shame. You're suspended. Badge, weapon, everything now. As Towns removed his badge with shaking hands, the precinct filled with the sound of clicking heels. Director Hale entered, flanked by agents. His presence was calm, commanding. The officers stepped aside, as if gravity itself had shifted. Hale looked directly at Towns. You didn't just arrest me, he said quietly. You exposed everything wrong with the system you swore to uphold. Towns lowered his head, speechless. The cameras that had once recorded Hale's humiliation were now capturing the officer's downfall. The story had turned. Justice was finally walking back into the room. The interrogation room was silent except for the hum of the camera. Dr. Jonathan Hale, now seated across from the disgraced officer, opened a thin file. On its cover, United States versus Bradley Towns. He looked calm, collected, every movement deliberate. Across the table, Towns looked like a man hollowed out by his own actions. Orange jumpsuit, unshaven, eyes haunted. State your name and former position for the record, Hale began. Bradley James Towns, the man muttered, barely audible. Former officer, 5th Precinct. Hale nodded. Mr. Towns, do you understand why you're here today? Towns swallowed hard. Because I arrested the wrong man. No, Hale said firmly. You're here because you violated your oath, planted evidence, and destroyed lives. Mine was simply the one that caught you. He laid out photographs, dozens of faces, all victims of Towns's abuse. These are people you humiliated, people who never had cameras to defend them. You remember them. Towns's eyes darted to the pictures, then away. I was just doing my job, he whispered. Hale leaned forward. Your job was to protect citizens, not target them. These men had no criminal records, yet you arrested them again and again. Why? Because they fit the pattern, Towns muttered. What pattern? Hale demanded. Towns hesitated, shame creeping into his voice. Black men. Nice cars. Wrong neighborhood. The words hung heavy in the air. Hale exhaled slowly, anger restrained but alive. You decided guilt based on color. You became the stereotype you were trained to resist. He pressed a button on the recorder. Video from the body cam flickered to life. Towns planting the bag, smirking, mocking Hale in front of the crowd. Towns flinched at the sound of his own voice. Know your place, boy. Do you deny this? Hale asked. No. Towns said, head down. I was wrong. Wrong. Hale repeated sharply. You weren't wrong, Mr. Towns, you were corrupt. And for years, no one stopped you. He opened another folder, statistics filling the pages. 85% of your arrests were black men. 89% of those cases were dismissed for lack of evidence. You didn't enforce the law, you manufactured it. Tears welled in Towns's eyes. I thought I was helping, getting bad guys off the street. Hale's expression hardened. You weren't cleaning the streets, you were staining them. For a long moment, neither spoke. The weight of truth was enough. Then Hale stood, straightening his suit. You'll face federal charges, civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and perjury. You'll serve time, Mr. Towns. But this isn't just about punishment. It's about exposure. Towns looked up, trembling. If I cooperate, help identify others doing the same, will it matter? It might shorten your sentence, Hale said, but it won't erase what you did. He paused at the door. You judged me by the color of my skin, not the content of my character. Now the entire country will judge you by the content of your actions. As Hale left the room, Deputy Director Carter met him with a folder thick as a dictionary. Sir, we've identified 12 more officers with identical patterns. You opened the floodgates. Good, Hale replied. Then let it flood. Maybe that's what it takes to wash this clean. Outside, reporters waited, cameras ready, hungry for the story that would redefine justice. And for the first time, Hale didn't hide his badge. He wore it openly, letting the world see that accountability had a face, and it looked like the man they once saw in handcuffs. 6 months later, the federal courthouse was filled to capacity. Reporters lined the halls, cameras flashed, and the world watched as Bradley Towns, once a proud officer, stood to receive his sentence. The man who had swaggered through Washington streets now trembled, shackled, his head bowed. Judge Patricia Williams adjusted her glasses, her voice steady and solemn. Mr. Towns, this court has rarely witnessed such a deliberate pattern of corruption and abuse of power. You didn't just disgrace your badge, you used it as a weapon. In the front row sat Director Jonathan Hale, surrounded by victims whose lives had been shattered by Towns's actions. Dr. Michael Thompson, the surgeon falsely arrested outside his own hospital, nodded quietly. Beside him, Professor Washington and Attorney Johnson watched, their faces a mix of pain and relief. The courtroom had already heard the evidence, body cam footage, falsified reports, dozens of dismissed cases. Towns had confessed to planting evidence in multiple arrests and cooperating with investigators to expose others like him. But no confession could undo the years of harm. Judge Williams continued, for 5 years, you operated without conscience, targeting citizens based on race and appearance. You will now face justice not just for your victims, but for the trust you destroyed. A hush filled the room. You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to your victims. You are permanently barred from any law enforcement position. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Justice, at last. Towns looked up briefly, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, he whispered, but his words fell flat in the air. After the verdict, Hale stepped to the podium outside the courthouse, facing a sea of cameras. His voice carried strength, but also compassion. Today isn't about vengeance. It's about accountability. The system failed too many for too long, but today, it worked. His reforms had already begun to ripple across the nation. New federal mandates required body cameras, independent investigations, and cultural bias training in every department receiving federal funds. Wrongfully convicted citizens were being exonerated, and officers like Rodriguez, who had dared to question corruption, were being promoted to leadership roles. A year later, on that same street where it all began, a bronze plaque was unveiled, in honor of those who suffered injustice and stood for truth. Let this place remind us that respect is not granted by status, but by humanity. Children played nearby as Hale walked past quietly, watching the sunlight glint off the engraved words. Captain Rodriguez, now head of training for the department, approached him. Use of force complaints are down by half, Director. We're finally seeing trust return. Hale smiled softly. It's a start. Real change doesn't happen overnight, but it begins when people stop accepting silence as normal. Inside the community center across the street, Hale addressed an audience of officers, citizens, and activists. Every uniform, every badge, every authority means nothing if it isn't guided by empathy and truth, he said. What happened to me could happen to anyone. That's why reform isn't punishment. It's protection. Applause filled the hall. The same story that had begun with humiliation now stood as a lesson written in courage and change. The video of Hale's wrongful arrest had gone viral. Yes, but what endured was the aftermath, a reminder that dignity, when defended, can rebuild nations. As he stepped outside into the fading sunset, a young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed to him. Mom, that's the man who changed everything. Hale smiled, nodded politely, and whispered to himself, No, son. The people did. He looked once more at the plaque, then turned toward the future, knowing his greatest fight was still ahead, to make sure no one else had to earn respect through pain. Justice had finally learned to see clearly.